in terms of protection, antioxidant, I've been saying this for a while now, and I really believe it. It's our green tea. I mean, we always talk about green tea as the major antioxidant, but based on what we know, I think rosemary is a couple of levels above and beyond that. So it's a great overall protective plant.
Hello and welcome to the Herbs with Rosalee podcast, a show exploring how herbs heal as medicine, as food, and through nature connection. I'm your host, Rosalee de la Forêt. I created this YouTube channel to share trusted herbal wisdom so that you can get the best results when relying on herbs for your health. I love offering up practical knowledge to help you dive deeper into the world of medicinal plants and seasonal living. Each episode of the Herbs with Rosalee podcast is shared on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast app. Transcripts and recipes for each episode can be found at herbswithrosaleepodcast.com or through the link in the video description. Also in the video description, you'll find other helpful resources. For example, to get my best herbal tips, as well as fun bonuses, be sure to sign up for my weekly herbal newsletter. Okay, grab your cup of tea and let's dive in. Well, I am so excited to bring you this conversation with Christophe Bernard, who is not only a brilliant herbalist with a huge following in France through his school and his YouTube channel, but also is a good friend of mine. I met Christophe about 10 years ago in France, and I was instantly taken with his views on plants and herbalism, and we've been friends ever since. Christophe is a French herbalist. He currently lives in southern France, Provence, where he spends his time picking, growing, and recommending herbs as a health practitioner. He has written 3 books and teaches at one of the oldest herbal schools in France. He also offers a set of online classes on how to make and use herbal preparations. His blog, AltheaProvence, has become a reference for plant lovers around the French-speaking world. Well, welcome, Christophe. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Hello, Rosalee.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have you here. And as I mentioned earlier, we are friends. And so I know a bit about your history. And I know that you did not start your professional adult life in the garden. So I'd love to hear about your journey and what that was like for you.
Well, it's a long story, but I'm going to tell it as it happened. We're talking early 2000, right? And I know it's going to sound a little weird maybe, but that's my story. I was living in the US in sunny San Diego with my wife and kids, and we were having a good time, really. I'm an engineer by trade. And then I did an MBA, and then I was flying all around the world for big corporate America, being a good student of the system. And then at some point, I just realized this was not aligned at all with my vision of life anymore. So I had that question in the back of my head: what can I do next? And really, I had no idea. And one day, out of nowhere, and I remember I was coming out of a nap on a Saturday afternoon outside on my lawn, looking at the clouds. I think I had a beer with me. And I saw myself preparing little bags of herbs, with a little string, the things you infuse in a cup. And I was making herbal teas, and that was the weirdest thing. And I wondered, could that be it? So I started to buy a few books on medicinal plants. And then I taught myself plant identification, and I started to pick in the wild and, started to make a lot of products and tinctures and powders and infused oils. And before you know it, I've taken over the whole kitchen and the garage and the pantry, and we've got, bags and mason jars everywhere, and it's a whole mess. And then at some point, I started to give consultations on the side. And really, at this stage, I knew this was going to be my new career. So that took a few years. I still had a traditional job, but I was doing all of this on the side. But at this stage, I decided to make it my new career. But then something was missing, and what was missing were my roots, the south of France, Provence, that region you know well by now. the whole aromatic plants growing in the wild, and the whole culture that I had known as a kid, where we went picking wild thyme and linden and dandelion greens and mushrooms and wild rosemary, and all of a sudden it came back to me. I had kind of forgotten about it, pushed it back in the corner of my head. It all came back. So we had to come back, and that's what the family did at the end of 2009. And you came to visit us a couple of years after that. I remember. I think it was probably like 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I fully dedicated myself to medicinal plants, picking, gardening, a lot of gardening. For a few years, I actually thought I would produce and sell my own medicinal plants. It didn't turn out this way, but I did a lot of gardening, picking, writing in different magazines, teaching. I still teach today. That's one of the fun parts of what I do. Consulting as a clinical herbalist, and developing a blog and a YouTube channel that has grown way above and beyond my expectations, I must say. So this is where I am today. It's great. It's exhilarating. Sometimes it's exhausting, but I love it all. All aspects. I want to be in the garden. I want to be in the wild, but I also want to be in the classroom, and I want to be with someone in front of me doing a consultation. Because if I stop one of those things, and I have stopped some of those things over the last few years because I was so exhausted. For instance, for about a year and a half, I stopped consulting, and then at some point, something didn't line up. I was teaching, and then I was not consulting, and I thought, no, I cannot teach if I'm not consulting. This is what keeps us real and on our toes. So I went back to this. So today I'm unable to drop any of those activities, but what I have done is scale back, spend more time with the family, because for a few years, to be frank with you, they suffered a little. I didn't see much of them. I was living in my fears of not making enough money, of not knowing if I would ever make it, if I would ever sell anything. But it was such a passion that I just couldn't drop it. And I'm glad I persisted, because finally, right, 12 plus years later, and things are working out, and I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah. You are such an inspiration to me. And, we are very similar in that we both went all in, and we are both prone to overdoing it and burnout and recovery. So it's been nice to have that, friendship with you, to just be like, oh, okay, that happens, pull back in, recenter. That's been very helpful for me. And then also what's been really inspiring for me is your work with looking at your roots and French history and the French use of herbs, especially in Provence, which is, of course, if people don't already know, a major interest of mine as well. And yes, your YouTube channel really inspired my YouTube channel. So that is also, I feel like I'm just so glad to have you here, because you've been such a, there's not, I don't know that there would be this YouTube channel without AltheaProvence.
Whoa,
and
thank you.
I love your videos. They're so much fun. And, for people who speak even intermediate French, I think they can understand your videos pretty well. I think I speak fairly advanced French, but I understand them quite well. And I think it's worth learning French to watch your videos, in fact.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for all those.
And there's so many, years later, there's so many of them, and such great information there.
Yeah. And as you know, the way it started was pretty laughable almost. Some of my videos, I just kept them just as a symbol of where I'm coming from, and the fact that I was pretty pathetic as I started, and mumbling and not smiling and being super stressed. I think I have one video that I kept. It's public on my channel, where I was sweating so much under the armpits. I mean, it was when I edited the video. I thought, do I make another one? And then I thought, no, it's been such a nightmare to shoot that 10 minutes video, and there's no way I'm going to redo it. So I ended up putting text boxes on my armpits whenever I lifted my arms to hide the sweat stains. That was pathetic, but I kept it as a symbol. of the fact that, we're not perfect, we mess up, and here we are in our beautiful imperfections.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And I want to say we are our own worst critic, because I've been watching your YouTube from the beginning, and I've loved it from the beginning. But you have also shared this with me, and you shared it in your YouTube videos about your humble beginnings, and it's been like a mantra for me, like just starting, the push to get my own started. I was like, doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to get better. The only way to get better is with time. So
Yeah, I think we have a mission today. I think it's such a weird time in our history. I think part of our mission is to make the knowledge as just available to as many people as possible. Here in France, you don't know this because those listening to us, you're in the U.S., and in the U.S. there was a beautiful rebirth of herbal practice in the early 70s with all of your herbal grandpas and grandmas, right, including Rosemary and all those great people, and Michael Tierra and Michael Moore and all those folks. But here in France, there was a desert in the 70s and 80s. A couple of people, a couple of schools, and we started much later, and we had this huge gap. So one thing I try to do as I came back is try to retrieve all that lost tradition. So now I think we're a bit stressed that it might disappear again. So I think, we need to write, we need to teach, we need to talk about it, so that now it's being captured in the wild west of the web, I guess, with its pros and cons, but it is a tool to communicate. So one thing I discovered when I came back to France was the love of infusion and herbal teas. So what I learned in the US was the practice around a lot of tinctures and powders and different forms. And then when I came back to France, I just found out that people love their herbal teas there, but we call infusions here. So I started to formulate on a liter of tea. What the way we formulate for tinctures. Well, I started to formulate with herbal teas, and that worked quite nicely. And actually, the French herbalist will usually use a lot more teas than they use tinctures or other forms, and that has been a fun part to rediscover.
Yeah, that's how I like it too. There's just something so much more satisfying about the relationship you form, with herbs that are in a tea, and just the enjoyment of it versus like the squirts of a tincture, which, tinctures have their time and place, but I definitely love the teas.
Yeah, I love it because you receive the bag from the herb store, and you open the bag, and first of all, you look at the color, and you may have a smell, and you're like, oh wow, this is a German chamomile. Smells like, wow, it reminds me of a honey. Oh, beautiful! It's white and yellow, beautiful colors. Then you put it in a mason jar maybe, and you pour your water, and all of a sudden you look how the water is changing color, and then you remove the lid and you smell, and you're like, whoa, that's like aromatherapy, coming out of the jar. Mm-hmm. And then you drink it. So I think it gets you more implicated, it gets you more involved in the preparation, and therefore in the healing process. And there's something I really, really like about it. Yeah.
Well, years ago, we did an herbal intensive together in Provence. It was, to this day, one of the most fun weeks of my life. And so many good memories for that. One thing, just being in Provence and seeing your chosen herb, rosemary, growing from the cracks and sidewalks, and, growing out of these 2,000-year-old stone fences or barriers is just such an amazing thing. And I do have this particular memory of, we were on a hike, walking from one village to the next, the old ancient trail, and we'd stopped to talk about rosemary. And I remember, like, in that moment, I fell in love with rosemary, harder than I ever have before in my life, because your love of rosemary was just so apparent. And I think somebody had asked one of those like impossible questions of, like, what herb would you have for the rest of your life or something? And you were just like, without a doubt. There was no no hesitation, without a doubt, rosemary. So I'm so glad you chose rosemary to talk about today.
Yeah, I had to choose it. I mean, it's such an amazing plant. I mean, in our region, it's a true survivor. To me, it represents resistance and resilience, survival. When you see it growing in this little crack of a rock, I mean, there's no soil, there's nothing, and it's not raining during the summer here, and yet that rosemary is growing, and it's aromatics. What it gives back is just so strong and amazing. And I really studied that plant because, yeah, it seemed to be doing a lot of things as an anti-inflammatory, as a liver plant. Actually, in France, it's a big liver plant. It's not known as a liver plant in the U.S., but in France, it's much appreciated for that. So when you need a choleretic and cholagogue, and to stimulate detox processes, and we use rosemary quite often in terms of protection, antioxidant. I've been saying this for a while now, and I really believe it. It's our green tea. I mean, we always talk about green tea as the major antioxidant, but based on what we know, I think rosemary is a couple of levels above and beyond that. So it's a great overall protective plant. So this is what I picked today. Yeah.
Wonderful. And yeah, that modulating inflammation is something that's just so big in my mind constantly, because of how much of our chronic illness today is really it's like that is the root cause of it.
Yeah.
And rosemary is sometimes called the queen of antioxidants. And it's amazing how many applications there is for rosemary with that in mind, in terms of like, say, cognitive health.
Oh yeah, amazing plant for cognitive health indeed. And if you look at some of the studies that were done, actually one of the conclusion of the scientists was it might be the most promising herb for Alzheimer's prevention, and even for the mild phases of the disease, mild to moderate phases of the disease, as a cognitive enhancer. So yeah, that's like one of the diseases of our generation. And as you said, chronic inflammation is just popping its head in all major chronic degenerative disease, from cancer to metabolic syndrome to autoimmune disease. There's always an low-grade chronic inflammation component. And so, yeah, we need to use those anti-inflammatory herbs the right way in our recommendations. And I like rosemary for that. Yeah, it can be, it can be a little too exciting for sensitive people. The French know this herb so well, and a lot of people will tell you, oh, I cannot take that in the afternoon. It's a little too stimulating. Or if I take it in the evening, I will not sleep. Literally, I will not sleep at all. It's got this hot, very young profile, very pitta, fiery. A little bit like us, Rosalee, I'm afraid, but yeah.
True. Yeah, I think, most of us grow up using rosemary in, like with potatoes, or, just like as a culinary herb. Something that I have begun to appreciate is, like, I grew up working with rosemary in culinary foods, but I was, back in the day, I was buying like McCormick spices, and that rosemary was probably like years old, and I'd like use a little bit. There's like such a world of difference between having fresh rosemary or freshly dried. Even, it works great dried as well, but having that just incredible freshness and the potency and the aromatic. So that's something I would encourage everyone to do. If you have rosemary already in your spice cabinet, go, take a little bit, pinch it, smell it, see what it's like. And if it's like not very aromatic, then get some new rosemary. It's so worth it.
Throw it away. Yeah, compost it. It will not work as well. Yeah, and it's true for all aromatics. When you pick them in the wild here in the south of France, and then you buy it dried from certain stores that don't really pay attention to that part, sometimes it's just so disappointing. So just night and day compared to the wild species, or even the one you grow in the garden. I mean, you can grow pretty darn good aromatics in the garden. Yeah, sure, it's never going to be as potent as the wild plants, but you know what? in my experience, it's pretty close. It's close enough to bring good results.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, here in France, the birth of aromatherapy and essential oils, we have a whole discipline around. Yeah, but what rosemary? What chemotype? Is it the camphor one, or the cineol one, or the this and the that? But that gets a little too complicated almost, especially since we're not dealing with essential oils here. We're dealing with the whole plant. But in my region in the south of France, it's definitely a camphor strong type. You can smell the camphor really easily. So yeah, different rosemaries in different regions and different growing conditions.
One thing that you brought into my life was rosemary tea, because growing up using culinary rosemary was not obvious to me to work with it as a tea, and that was something, your love of rosemary tea was rubbed off on me. And then in my first book, Alchemy of Herbs, I published your recipe for the perfect cup of rosemary tea. Are you remembering that now? You're like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Of course I do. Yeah.
Which I loved at that, it was like a quick infusion, so it's not with those aromatics. It's like you just want those like lovely aromatics and not necessarily the bitterness with a longer
The bitters,
infusion.
the tannins, that you get after, if you let it steep a little too long. That's true. The same with thyme. Actually, thyme can be such a wonderful tea if you let it steep for 3-4 minutes maybe, and then at some point, if you forget about it, especially if you cut a little bit too much of the wood, how the thyme plant has a tendency to get woody after a few years. If you use some of the wood, then at some point it gets so harsh on the throat that it's almost too difficult to drink. Too much tannins, too astringent, which is not the goal. Usually, you use those aromatics mostly for their aromatics. Yeah, the tannins can be interesting too, but not too much.
Not too much.
Yeah, good combination too. I love rosemary and peppermint. I love this combination. I think it goes super well. And again, peppermint in France is considered as a liver plant, choleretic and cholagogue. So the two go well together. And I think rosemary and a Chinese green tea, not the Japanese, the taste doesn't go well, I find, but the Chinese green tea, the two combined is actually pretty yummy as well. So yeah, you may want to try.
Yeah, that's a nice antioxidant combination as well. Well, another way that rosemary is another one of the many gifts of rosemary is that it protects food, and the extracts of rosemary are often added to meats and bakery goods. Yep. And I'm really excited about your recipe because that's sounds delicious, and what a great way to get those protective qualities.
Yeah, that is true. Actually, another part of our tradition that I find really interesting is how our ancestors used aromatic plants to protect the food from spoiling, and how it would kill the bugs and bacteria, and of course give taste, but also protect us and help us to digest the food, right? I mean, here in France, we put a lot of sage with the pork roast, for instance, or savory with beans. I mean, there's a historical reason for this. It's not just for the taste, but one aspect we've talked about in our circles is when it comes to food, is the fact that when we roast food, the browning process, how that is not good for health, right? It's the whole protein glycation. So sugars get associated with proteins through a process called glycation, and those glycated products are not good for us. They're toxic. They need to be detoxed, and they create a lot of oxidative stress. So to protect our bodies against that, then we can use those antioxidants. So I was, always been wondering, well, rosemary, how do I integrate it with my food? Of course, I can cut it in small pieces and I can sprinkle it on my veggies or the meat and this and that. And then one day, a chef actually gave me that trick. He said, you know what? I found a great way to incorporate the taste of rosemary through infusion, through rosemary tea. So he said, there's two ways you can use your tea. So first, you have to make a strong tea, right? So it's going to depend on the strength of your rosemary. It's going to depend on whether it's fresh or dried. But you make it and you taste it, and it needs to taste like really strong. It's still drinkable, but you have to say to yourself, "Whoa, I guess I could still drink it, but it's like almost too strong for me." And if you cannot achieve that, then you double steep. You can do that. Maybe if your rosemary is not as pungent, so you make another. You use the hot liquid, the hot infusion from the first batch, and you infuse again some rosemary inside. And then once it is ready, one simple thing you can do is use it to deglaze a pan. So say you've been preparing a stir fry with, maybe a few carrots and turnips from the garden, and maybe a few burdock roots, and with olive oil and garlic, and it's all smelling super nice. And the bottom of the pan is looking a little brownish with things stuck to it. Well, then you throw a bit of your rosemary infusion and you deglaze all that brown stuff. Of course, that is not very good for us, but it's yummy.
Very yummy.
It's very yummy, and rosemary will, go help it to get detached, and of course, it will ensure that we get enough antioxidant, maybe to buffer a little all that oxidative stress created by this browning. And it does give a pretty good taste. It gives it more taste than if you sprinkle the rosemary and the herbs. I've been quite amazed by that, and this is why the chef I talked to liked it so much. It really brings in the taste much better than the actual whole herbs. And then the second trick he gave me was to put it in a spray bottle, and when you barbecue, to spray it on a regular basis. So I don't know, whatever barbecue you have, if you have the one that opens, then every minute or so you open and you spray your rosemary in tea on the food, and then you close again. It will prevent browning, it will keep the food moist, and it will give it the taste of rosemary. So that's something I like to do as well. It's pretty cool. And of course, you can experiment with other aromatic herbs. It gets pretty fun, actually. You can, of course, use the thyme and the sage and the savory, but also try lavender. Lavender mixed with the other aromatics can be quite interesting. Monarda fistulosa, very strong, thyme-like flavor that is very interesting for barbecues. Sometimes can be almost a little too strong. I mean, of all the plants, rosemary is probably the powerhouse here. My top choice, but I could blend different herbs and make it a little more fun. Play with the flavors. It's really interesting. The only, I guess, issue is that you cannot keep that infusion very long, right? So maybe 48 hours in the fridge, but usually you have to make a fresh batch every time you want to cook. Otherwise, it's gonna spoil very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds delicious. I can't wait to play with that. I think that's going to be lots of fun. And I'm definitely going to start with rosemary, and then, like you said, try out different aromatics. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Thank you. For the listeners, as you probably know by now, I love to share recipes when we talk about these plants. Recipes are a wonderful way for you to get involved and create your own experience with herbs. It's one thing to hear cool facts about rosemary, but another thing to form your own relationship with this plant through observing, tending, and, of course, tasting. And what better way to do that than with Christophe's recipe for Rosemary Deglazing barbecue spray. I think this sounds really delicious, and what an interesting way to work with rosemary. You can download your recipe card using the link in the video description. On that same page, you'll also find the show notes, including direct links to Christophe's offerings and a transcript of this interview. So you always have lots going on. I'm excited to hear what are you up to these days? What projects do you have going on?
So at the moment, as I'm working on pretty big project. So a bit of the background story here is the fact that compared to the US or England, herbalism has been a little slow to mature here in France. We talked about the rebirth in the US in the 70s and then this phenomenal explosion in the 90s and the 2000s up until now. And I think here in France, we've had a long period of kind of slow development. I think we woke up much later on the practice, but at the moment we're, of course, all very excited, and the interest in the overall population is very, very high. I think it's been a real explosion, especially after this, or still during this COVID period. I think a lot of people have been wondering, how can I take care of myself? How can I work on prevention and on immunity? And one thing we haven't fully developed in all the schools is the practice. The practice, what in the US we call clinical herbalism, working with people, advising people, but not just like in 5 minutes in the corner of the counter in the store. Really, over a period of several months, through different cycles, help them to find relief for their chronic condition and hopefully helping them to get better. And we've been a little shy of exposing ourselves on that front due to, risks, and a system that was not waiting for us with open arms. And but at this stage, sorry, but no more shyness now. We have a role to play, and we are going to play that role. That's just, we're tired of being shy and concerned and afraid. No more. We're done. We're going to move forward in a careful way, of course, as a complement to traditional treatment, very respectful of the system, just like herbalists are doing everywhere else in the world. As one of the person I know is always saying, well, show me the dead, show me where are the dead people? Under the carpet? No, come on, we're all pretty careful. So I am developing a new program to help students bridge that gap, to move from the theory to the practice, to move from everything they've been learning in the programs we have today in France. They usually they last about 3 years of study. And then I'm going to launch another module, a new program that helps them to evaluate the person in front of them, in their strength and their weaknesses, using a simple way to determine strength and weaknesses based on physiology, right? Occidental models, physiology, something quite simple, but then understanding how they can work on what we call here the terrain. I don't know if there's an English word for that, but the foundations of health. Yeah, the foundations of health, to help them get better. The vitalist approach, help themselves, help their system become stronger. So it's the culmination of a lot of years of practice, and it's a pretty complex program to make, and I'm completely absorbed in the project at the moment. But I'm quite excited about it, and looking forward to welcoming the first applicants probably early 2022. So around January, February, I'm hoping to launch the program. It's been a big chunk of work at the moment. Yeah.
I'll bet that's going to be phenomenal. Yeah. And it is in French, right?
Yeah, it will be in French because, over the years, I've worked with a lot of people around the world. I think there's a lot of opportunities in different countries, but I just came to realize that at the moment, it's the French system that needs us French practitioners, the country, almost the herbalists in the country need us, and we need to focus on our country, our system of education, and making it better, because we're playing catch up a little. We're going to catch up, but at the moment we're lagging behind compared to a few countries. So we need to work on that. Yeah. So it'll be fully in French.
Well, it's going to be a marvelous contribution. I know it's going to be really just popular and insightful, and I love your teaching so much, so I know it's going to be fabulous.
Yeah, thanks. I'll wait for the first students to tell me what they think. I'm always a little stressed, when I launch a new program, like, are they gonna like it or are they not? They usually like it, so that's the good part of it. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Well, Christophe, I'd love to end with the final question, which is the question I'm asking everybody in season 2, which is, what has most surprised you about herbalism along your path?
Gosh. Well, I think I think it's working with people with chronic health conditions, those people with a long list of ailments. And on top of this, you superimpose this amazing richness of plants. And it's complicated, and it gives a lot of humility, I think. I've learned that what is being taught in books and schools is just a baseline. It's a basic model that barely scratches the surface. It needs to be taught, but it's just a starting point. And the practice, gosh, it's complex. It makes you sweat. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you fully live that imposter syndrome. I think we all have to go through that. It requires a lot of fine tuning. What they don't teach you in school, at least in France, is that this process is very iterative and it takes time. And you, the practitioner, you will learn as much as the person in front of you about plants and about how they work for that person. What surprises me is that sometimes you get unexpected reactions. Some individuals are hypersensitive to so many things. Sometimes you introduce a plant and it seemed pretty mild to you, but it's going to kick the liver a little too hard. And then all of a sudden they have maybe a rash coming up or inflammation in certain places. And so you have to back off, you have to adjust. It's very humbling. But overall, seeing a person getting better and better, sometimes through this 2 steps forward and sometimes through the 1 step back, but overall making progress, I think it's very humbling. It puts us back in our place. Our place is not humans master of the universe and humans master of the herbs, the all-powerful human who think that they know everything. We're just students of the plants. And the plants, I think they've taught me to keep my cup empty. And you know what? I think the more I practice, and sometimes I get this feeling that the less I know, which used to stress me out, but I've come to think it's actually pretty healthy to just let go of expectations. Start with this baseline of knowledge we have. We all have our tools. I know you use a lot of energetics, and me, it's a little more physiology with a bit of energetics sprinkled. And some people might do Chinese medicine or Ayurveda, so we have this baggage we carry. But after that, I mean, you need to keep your cup empty and be ready to be surprised and let yourself be guided and adjust. And sometimes just discover things that just go opposite to what you learn. And you might doubt it. You might say, no, I mean, really? You took that plant, you took lemon balm and you couldn't sleep for 3 nights in a row? No, I don't think that's it. But, it might be it, because the people we work with, they're not dumb. They tried, they couldn't sleep maybe, and they stopped for a few days and it got better, and they tried again and they couldn't sleep again. So, hey, to me, that's better than a clinical trial. So I keep being surprised, and that's good. That's pretty healthy.
Yeah, there's so many pearls of wisdom in there, Christophe. Just like some that jumped out at me was how, what we learn in books versus what happens in practice is just totally different. And
Yeah.
I was also thinking about, so many of us get started with herbs because we have an illness that we want, to either, we tried Western medicine, it didn't work, or we want natural solutions. And so many, like the first questions are like, what herb is good for blank?
Yeah.
And what I'm getting from, what I'm thinking about as you're talking is just like there's so much richness and complexity behind that if somebody's willing to go beyond that initial question of like, what herb do I take for this? And find that richness and complexity and understand it's not a straight line all the time. We have ups and
Yeah,
downs and 2 steps
yeah.
forward, 1 step back, as you said. And there is so much complexity there.
It's very complex. And I think one of the trap is to see the world through who we are. Me, for instance, one of my struggle through my whole life has been debilitating migraines. And so, of course, I studied a lot of migraines and I work a lot with a lot of migraine sufferers. And, at the beginning, you might just think that what worked for you will work with everybody. Yeah, I found the way to deal with migraines. No, you found nothing. You know nothing, right? So get back to square one. And I had joint pain, and I moved on to paleo type of nutrition, and it all went away. And so the whole world should do paleo. Well, maybe not. For someone else, it'll be, they'll move to raw food and they'll feel wonderful. And another person, they'll do raw food and they'll be a mess.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, that the trap we all fall into as beginners. And then we learn to move out of it and be a little more open to, again, being surprised. Yeah.
Well, here's to being surprised in herbalism. I think that's probably the best mindset we can have.
Yeah, I'll drink to that tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Christophe, for being here, for sharing your wisdom with us. It's such a pleasure and just an honor for me to have you on the podcast. So
well, I mean, it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope I've been a good boy and you invite me for season 3.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you back.
All right.
Thanks, Christophe.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Don't forget to click the link in the video description to get free access to Christophe's Rosemary Deglazing barbecue spray. Also available are the complete show notes, including the transcript. You can also visit Christophe directly at AltheaProvence.com. Before you go, though, be sure to click the subscribe button so you'll be the first to get my new videos, including interviews like this. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts about this interview with Christophe and your relationship with rosemary. Leave your comments below. I deeply believe that this world needs more herbalists and plant-centered folks. I'm so glad you're here as part of this herbal community. Have a beautiful day.